8 years left to end poverty and hunger, to halve global emissions. It didn't start out as planned. We're not moving in the right direction. Years of progress lost in the pandemic. Escalating conflicts, climate breakdown. So where are we now? For decades, we successfully fought poverty. Now it's on the rise, again. 1 out of 10 suffer from hunger, more people than ever forced out of their homes. Climate disasters increasing. Droughts alone estimated to displace 700 million people by 2030. This year, CO2 emissions hit a new record. At this rate, annual emissions will be 14% higher in 2030. Meanwhile, fossil energy receives $700 billion in subsidies from governments.
Your government.
Safe water and sanitation not made accessible fast enough. Progress must quadruple to cover all people by 2030. Women are held back at all levels. At this pace, by 2030, 825 million children won't have secondary level education. Human rights, health, and equality all hurt in the wake of war and disaster. Disrupted economies, food and energy crisis, and galloping costs of living damage global solidarity. Everything interconnected. Everyone intertwined. Business as usual won't cut it. Even though we made progress before, going back to pre-pandemic ways is not enough. We need a new paradigm built on the pillars of our 17 goals. Rethink conventions, flip the orthodoxies. Governments, organizations, corporations, citizens of the world, snap out of it. It's time for bold climate action. To act for women and girls, for social justice and inclusion. Scale up the transition to renewable energy. Create 85 million green jobs. Phase out fossil fuel subsidies and tax carbon. $2.8 trillion. Keep your promises. Support developing nations. Write off debts. Free up $1 trillion for climate resilience, people, and communities. $500 billion for Africa to achieve universal energy access by 2030. Commit to a circular economy now. New, resilient food systems. They can cut waste by 17%. Strengthen domestic financial institutions. Make insurance and banking accessible to everyone. Scale up the digital transformation to educate the 1.6 billion kids who missed school in the pandemic. Educate girls, including the 130 million not in school now. Ensure women's equal share of decision-making. Eliminate discrimination against female workers and boost productivity by 40%. We cannot afford to leave anyone behind. We have a to-do list. We have the resources. 8 years to reach our goals. We're on this planet together, so let's work together. Let's get the list done.
Hello and welcome to the 2022 SDG Action Zone, the event that brings the United Nations to the world and the world to the United Nations. I'm Nadira Hira, and I have the honor of being your host for 3 action-packed days. They're going to be informative, interactive, and most of all, we hope, inspirational in the truest sense. Because our hope is that at the end of all this, every one of us is going to be inspired to think deeply, to speak passionately, and to act. So whether you're here for the first time or you've joined us before, we are so glad to have you. And now, here to officially open the SDG Action Zone with an urgent message from the front lines of the fight to attain the SDGs. Please welcome the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres.
Dear friends, welcome everyone to the SDG Action Zone. This is the place for people to come together and discuss and demand solutions to accelerate progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs are our roadmap to a better world. But as we reach the halfway point to the 2030 deadline, the goals are in trouble. Progress has stalled, and in some cases, even reversed. We need to rescue the SDGs now. We need to move from rhetoric to reality and transform words into action and investment across all of the goals. From education and healthcare, to eradicating poverty and fighting inequality in every country, to climate action, to full equality for women and girls, to building peace. This year's Action Zone shines a spotlight on the activists, champions and allies of sustainable development from around the world. This platform belongs to you, because we all deserve a say in the future, and we all have a responsibility online, in the streets and in our neighborhoods and countries to make our voices heard and we build a better future for all. Silence is not an option. That's what the SDG Action Zone is all about. Making your voices heard, making your actions count, and demanding action from world leaders. The countdown to 2030 is on. Let's get it done.
Thank you so much, Secretary General. The warnings are stark, and rightly so. But there's also plenty to motivate and empower, which is exactly the right tone for these next 3 days. And in that same spirit, we have another important message, this time from the co-chair of the SDG Advocates, a very special group of 17 influential people using their unique platforms to raise ambition around the SDGs and reach the most vulnerable first. Welcome from Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Hello everyone, bonjour à tous, and welcome to the SDG Action Zone. I'm honored to be joining you as a co-chair of the SDG Advocates Group alongside my friend, Prime Minister Mia Mottley. Au Canada et dans le groupe des défenseurs des objectifs de développement durable, on croit à la force du multilatéralisme et des rencontres comme celle-ci. Plus que jamais, on doit continuer à travailler ensemble, on doit être créatif pour surmonter les défis auxquels on fait face. Le programme à l'horizon 2030 nous offre une feuille de route commune pour bâtir un avenir meilleur. Il conçoit la collaboration comme étant la meilleure façon de bâtir un monde pacifique, prospère et sain qui ne laisse personne pour compte. My friends, Canada is here to work with you as partners. And we're stepping up in our efforts to reduce poverty and inequality. Since 2020, we've contributed close to $1 billion a year in humanitarian assistance, including emergency food and nutrition as a key part of that. We've also disbursed $827 million for agriculture and food systems so we can better address the global food security challenges we're facing. L'objectif de développement durable numéro 5, qui porte sur l'égalité des sexes, est également une grande priorité pour nous. En 2017, on a lancé la première politique d'aide internationale féministe du Canada qui cible l'égalité des sexes et le renforcement de l'autonomie des femmes et des filles. Pour se relever de la pandémie, on a mis sur pied le Fonds de réponse et de relance féministe et un groupe de travail sur les femmes dans l'économie qui conseille notre gouvernement. Et on va continuer de tenir compte des facteurs identitaires multiples et de travailler de concert avec des organismes voués aux droits des femmes pour s'assurer que les femmes sont représentées au plus haut échelon de notre gouvernement. Of course, protecting our climate continues to be a core area of the decade of action. Canada is investing over $5 billion for things like water management in small island states and sustainable agriculture across Africa. We continue to mobilize global momentum for more countries to adopt a price on pollution in their economies, and we're proud to be welcoming the world to Montreal in December for COP15 to drive an ambitious global biodiversity framework. On these issues and many more, it's wonderful to see the momentum that is building to move our SDGs forward. Grâce aux idées et à l'inspiration qu'on trouve ensemble, on a le pouvoir de créer un avenir à notre image, un avenir plus inclusif, plus vert et plus pacifique. Et pour y arriver, chaque geste compte, que ce soit modifier des politiques, d'engager un dialogue ou de se rassembler comme un événement comme celui-ci. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for everything you're doing to create a better world. Merci.
Thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau. Now from one co-chair of the SDG advocates to the other. On Monday, the SDG Moment offered an opportunity to take stock of our progress on the SDGs around the world. Speaking from the General Assembly, here's Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley.
Your Excellencies all, please permit me at the outset of this morning's SDG Moment to extend yet again our deepest sympathy to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth on the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. But as we speak this morning, in this moment, I ask us to ask ourselves who is needed on this journey. Heads of state, heads of government, yes. Ministers and ministries of finance, yes. But above all else, the individual citizens of this world. And that is why the United Nations has sought to ask us to remember the to-do list. Because in each of our lives every day, we make commitments about things that we must complete to make our lives better. And so we are asked today to do the same in this world, which is at a critical juncture in the affairs of man. We have seen, regrettably, a world that has reminded us that there is no right to life, that there is no right to success, that there is no right to ensuring that there can be prosperity. And regrettably, in seeing that, we have failed to lay the foundations that will allow us to continue to see the people who become the victims of hunger, to feel the people who become the victims of no education, to appreciate that a world that is driven by a climate crisis cannot provide a sustainable future for us. Are we so arrogant as to believe that there will be no failed societies and no extinct species, when the history shows us otherwise? I ask us this morning to let us speak to the citizens of the world. Let us speak to the citizens of the world, the boys and girls who we want in this battle to remind their leaders, to remind their parents, to remind their head teachers, to remind each other that they are necessary to join the army to fight against poverty. The first goal, end poverty. The second goal, to make sure that people can eat and that we end hunger. The third goal, to make sure that we can deliver good health for all. The fourth, to provide quality education so that people can think for themselves and lay a platform on which they can build for themselves. The fifth, to achieve gender equality so that whether it is a boy or a girl, or whatever gender you assume, that you have the right to live in this world without fear of discrimination and with opportunities equal to all others. And the staff of life, water, to ensure that there's water for all. How can that be something that the global community doesn't fight for? Or clean energy, because we have seen just now in the video what an abundant reliance on fossil fuels and an industrial revolution has done for us. And yes, for people of color, we say that we are now the victims of double jeopardy because our blood, sweat, and tears brought about the industrial revolution. And for too many of us now, we are on the front line of the climate crisis. And how do we get through when we speak to you as young people? We ask you to go for education. This assembly will speak today about the importance of transforming education so that you can be the best that you can be. But that is ultimately so that you can support yourself. Because freedom is about choice. And to have that choice, you need jobs. And that's what the to-do list at number 8 tells us. To support also those jobs, we need sustainable infrastructure. And we need to be innovative in this world where technology is moving at the rapid rate at which it is moving. And in all these things, as His Excellency Emperor Haile Selassie stood here and said, we need to fight inequality. If not, there shall be war. We need also to make sure that the environment within which we live, particularly in cities, when people come in their millions and their thousands and their hundreds to cities, that the cities can provide life for them because their actions and living is sustainable. And every day we use things. And you, more than anyone else as children, can lead the world in a waste-free world, in a world that recognizes that if we take the plastics and we take the things that we just use and throw away, that they have to go somewhere. But you, the children, can lead the revolution to changing our habits. And if you change those habits, then the to-do list of protecting the oceans and protecting life on land becomes a little easier. But we can't do that unless we also tackle the climate crisis. And those who must be on the front line must be those who expect to be living 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now. My friends, and if we can do all of that, and if we can ensure fairness by ensuring that we can end conflict and we can end corruption, and we can tell the world that we don't want only to talk about the ending of conflict in the Ukraine. We want conflict ended in Tigray. We want conflict ended in Syria. We want conflict ended wherever it raises its head in the world. We want also conflict ended when it appears to be under the guise of criminality, like it is in Haiti. We want you, my friends, the children of this world, to hold us, the governments, accountable, and to recognize that we do have choice, and leaders can make decisions, and leaders are not constrained in the decisions that we make, and that everything does not depend on financing, although it is absolutely critical. And we will fight for financing, as I will speak later this week about, for the reform of the international financial architecture. But even without that, there are things that you and I can do. And we ask you, the children of this world, to hold our feet to the fire and make this world a better place to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Motley. So much has happened since we were together for last year's Action Zone. So much has shifted in the world. The fallout from military conflict, such as the war in Ukraine, is devastating communities and the global economy. Hard-won women's rights, particularly those involving reproductive health and economic justice, have been unceremoniously stripped. Disasters spurred by climate change feel ever more frequent, ever more likely. And although the narrative is changing, the truth is that COVID-19 is still wreaking havoc on the vulnerable, with developing countries who can least afford it being subjected to delayed vaccine rollouts on top of structural deficiencies. But it's despite, or perhaps because of, these bleak realities that we have to fight harder than ever. It's more crucial now than it has ever been that we amplify those with the power to force positive change. The doers, the demanders, the champions, the activists and the allies, including all of you. You'll notice, of course, that the Secretary General didn't shy away from any of the harsh truths facing us at this difficult moment. And neither will we. That's going to mean having some tough, brutally honest conversations. But that's also the power of this space. It's what we talk about here, openly, with the people striving hardest for change, in full acknowledgement of all the problems and possibilities, that becomes transformational action out there. So in this year's Action Zone, we'll be shining a spotlight first and foremost on the folks who are already driving dramatic change. Whether on a global, regional, national, or local level, the speakers we'll hear from are making our world better. We'll meet the people transforming their communities on the ground, the political parties working for inclusive and fair societies, the corporate leaders paving the way for a more sustainable approach to business across industries, the often unsung activists doing critical work to meet the SDGs. We'll be talking to all of them about the urgent work ahead and exactly what it's going to take to achieve the future we need for people and for planet. Now, these conversations will range far and wide, but they're informed by the Decade of Action, a push to deliver the SDGs by 2030 that we're in the midst of as we speak. Many of you know the Decade of Action centers around 3 key components, and each of these will serve as the theme for one of our days here in the Action Zone. Naturally, the topics, like the SDGs, are deeply interlinked, so they'll all echo across our entire event. But today, day 1, we'll explore the Sustainable Development Goals specifically through the lens of poverty and inequalities. Day 2 will move to a gender equality and inclusion perspective, and day 3 will be driven by all things climate. Of course, it's not lost on any of us that nearly 3 years have passed since we entered the Decade of Action, and we're fast approaching the halfway point to 2030. We've often spoken about the SDGs as the world's to-do list, a visual reminder of the promises made by every single world leader in the UN back in 2015. And while the leaders have changed, and the world itself has certainly changed, at the core of things, the vision and aspirations are what they always were. We do have to adapt to new threats, to innovate, recalibrate, change tack. But the goals, as they were written in 2015, still represent the exact challenges we need to overcome today in order to transform the lives of billions and put the planet on a sustainable course, leaving no one behind. What does bear revisiting, though, is whether and how we can achieve them. Not only are we far from on track to meet the SDGs, we've moved in the wrong direction on too many metrics, owing in part to the pandemic and everything that came with it. So the time for small tasks is behind us. You won't be hearing us encourage every person to do one small thing or asking business and governments to move the needle just a tiny bit. That's just no longer enough. Our systems are so perverted and polluted that getting back on track won't be a matter of redoubling or even tripling our efforts. 4-fold won't even be enough. We're going to need to increase our efforts exponentially and with unprecedented urgency. It's daunting, for sure, but history tells us it's also possible. Whenever humankind has had to achieve something extraordinary, delivering humanitarian aid to war-torn communities, responding to natural disasters, or developing vaccines and treatments that save millions of lives, the answer's been the same. Reach out to extraordinary people, leaders, innovators, those with iron-cast values, unwavering commitment, and a sense of solidarity. Then assemble those people, find out what they can teach each other, and focus everyone's attention, resources, and never-ending ingenuity on execution. That's when breakthroughs happen. That's when exponential becomes possible. And that's the bar we'll set for ourselves here. Speaking of setting the bar, it is my pleasure now to introduce one of the key minds behind the SDG Action Zone. Here to talk about the Action Zone's ambitions, please welcome the global head of the SDG Strategy Hub, Dauda Jabarte. Dauda, thank you so much for joining us. Today is all about poverty and inequalities, but what's the big message?
Thanks, Indira. I think there are 2. The first is simple. We have to harness the power of accountability and individual choice. We know that our audience has the will to make transformative change, and we know that when we leave here, you will hopefully be inspired and have some of the tools and inspiration to accelerate the SDGs and raise accountability. The second is a little bit more challenging. We need governments and industry to accept individual choice alone will never get us where we need to go. That they acknowledge their responsibility and deliver on their promises, putting both people and planet at the center of everything they do. So when we're looking for solutions, I think getting those with power to commit and achieve their commitments is exactly what the first step is.
And how do we go about finding the solutions?
Well, precisely. We have some of the answers, but there's so many possibilities and opportunities, and that's exactly what the SDG Action Zone is all about. The global landscape has changed enormously in the last year alone. The war in the Ukraine in particular, climate disasters that are happening around the world, and it's the developing world that is feeling it the most. We have to deal with the compounding crises around the world and respond to the reality on the ground and positively impact people's lives. The solutions are out there. It's a matter of how they get financed and how they get scaled up to where they matter the most.
Absolutely. We've all heard it said that the war in Ukraine, the climate crisis, and the repercussions of COVID-19 caused the perfect storm. Can you tell us exactly what's at stake here?
Well, Nadira, you've spoken today about the necessity of facing harsh truths. And this is a prime example of that. You know, the current economic downturn risks tipping way too many people into poverty, into hunger, into climate disaster. And for the first time in history, poverty is increasing, hunger is increasing instead of improving and progress being made. And we risk setting an entire generation back instead of moving forward and progressing things. And this is, you know, this work is ever more important than ever. It's urgent. It needs to happen. We need to do everything in our power to prevent the world's most vulnerable and the planet from becoming collateral damage. This is not an abstract idea. It's about real people. It's about their lives. It's about their livelihoods. And it's about the planet's ability to sustain us.
Thank you, Dada. We certainly have work to do, but that's why spaces like this are so very important, and we couldn't be more grateful to you and the SDG Action Zone team for creating it. Of course, creating it isn't enough. We've got to get everyone here and talking to, and that's where you all come in, because take it from me, you're a vital component of the Action Zone, maybe the most vital. So please spread the word and join in. We've always been able to count on our audience for the most provocative and dynamic questions. So we'll be calling our speakers back at the end of each day for a very special Ask Away session, powered by you. Submit your questions directly throughout the day using our virtual platform, and we'll make sure that as many as possible get answered. We'll also be asking you questions at various points in the program using live polls, so look out for those too. In fact, there should be one popping up right now. Tell us what you think, and I'll bring you the results in the Ask Away. There's so much happening, but don't worry, you can find our full program on our website, which will also house all the on-demand content. Just go to sdgactionzone.org to catch up on any sessions you missed, rewatch the discussions you couldn't get enough of, and share all this incredible content with everyone you know. Which brings me, of course, to hashtags. With everything we've got in store for you, we're ready for our social media to go wild. So make it your mission to get your friends, family, colleagues, mentors, neighbors, teachers, everyone on board with us using hashtag SDG Action Zone and hashtag 4People4Planet. And feel free to tag our handle too, which is at SDG Action Zone. Let me say it again, just for good measure. Please visit us at sdgactionzone.org to keep up with all our great content on demand. Tag and follow us on Twitter and Instagram with the handle at SDG Action Zone, and use hashtag SDG Action Zone and hashtag 4People4Planet to keep the conversation going everywhere you post. And now, get ready for our opening plenary. But first, have we got a performance for you? It's a rousing poem from a remarkable young activist whose unforgettable appearance at the inauguration of US President Joe Biden took the world by storm, and she hasn't stopped since. Here's the brilliant Amanda Gorman with a message to world leaders.
Your Excellencies, friends, our next guest is an inspiring young woman who has moved many of us with her poems of hope, change, unity, and resilience. Please welcome poet, activist, and Unicef supporter, Amanda Gorman.
UN Secretary General, distinguished guests, and all of humankind. How can I ask you to do good when we've barely withstood our greatest threats yet? The depths of death, despair, and disparity, atrocities across cities, towns, and countries, lives lost, climactic costs, exhausted, angered. We are endangered, not because of our numbers, but because of our numbness. We're strangers to one another's perils and pain, unaware that the welfare of the public and the planet share a name. Equality doesn't mean being the exact same, but enacting a vast aim, the good of the world to its highest capability. The wise believe that our people without power leaves our planet without possibility. Therefore, though poverty is a poor existence, complicity is a poorer excuse. We must go the distance, though this battle is hard and huge, though this fight we did not choose for. Preserving the earth isn't a battle too big to win, but a blessing too large to lose. This is the most pressing truth, that our people have only one planet to call home, and our planet has only one people to call its own. We can either divide and be conquered by the few, or we can decide to conquer the future and say that today a new dawn rewrote. Say that as long as we have humanity, we will forever have hope. Together, we won't just be the generation that tries, but the generation that triumphs. Let us see a legacy where tomorrow is not driven by the human condition, but by our human conviction. And while hope alone can't save us now, with it, we can brave the now, because our hardest change hinges on our darkest challenges. Thus, may our crisis be our cry, our crossroad, the oldest ode we owe each other. We chime it for the climate, for our communities. We shall respect and protect every part of this planet, hand it to every heart on this earth until no one's worth is rendered by the race, gender, class, or identity they were born. This morn, let it be sworn that we are one human kin, grounded not just by the griefs we bear, but by the good we begin. To anyone out there, I only ask that you care before it's too late, that you live aware and awake, that you lead with love in hours of hate. I challenge you to heed this call. I dare you to shape our fate. Above all, I dare you to do good so that the world might be great. Thank you.